Hello, and welcome to the first video on verifying trigonometric identities. I wanted to start with a problem which I thought was a helpful one for a lot of these kinds of problems, these verifying identity problems. And what we're doing when we verify these identities is we're just showing that each side's equal. The left-hand side's equal to the right-hand side. And typically all we need to do is use algebra and your trigonometric identities that you already know. For this problem, really there's not too much that we need. So in order to show that 1 plus cosine of theta divided by cosine of theta is exactly the same as tangent squared divided by secant theta minus 1, we just need a few things. So we need to know, you need to remember that sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. That tangent is sine theta over cosine theta. And so tangent squared is sine squared divided by cosine squared. And that 1 over cosine is equal to secant theta. And really that's it for our trig that we have to remember. The rest of it's just algebra. So the algebra I'm going to use to go from the left-hand side and show that's equivalent to the right-hand side is going to be it's called a special factoring formula. And this one works out to a squared minus b squared, which we call our difference of squares. And you can get that just FOILing it out, right? Remember from a previous math course, our first, and then outer, and I guess I should use all these colors, inner, and then our last, right? And then you'll find that the middle terms cancel, and you're just left with a squared minus b squared. The only other bit of algebra that we need would be this bit here. So we know that this is going to be, if we distribute, we'd have a times b plus a times c. And when we go from here to here, we call that distributing. And then when we go backwards, we use the distributing property in reverse. We call that factoring. And the way we accomplish that, so if we start on this right-hand side and I want to go back to the left-hand side here, I want to divide out whatever I'm factoring from each term. So if I want to factor out an a, I divide each side by a, and then I need to multiply this entire quantity by what I'm factoring out. And then the a is going to stay the same on the outside. Here it's going to cancel. I'm just left with a b, and here it cancels again. I'm left with a c. And then we get back to where we were. And that's all the algebra and the trig we need to know to show that this side is equivalent to this side for our trigonometric identity. So as I said, I'm going to start with the left-hand side. I'm just going to rewrite it down here. And the hardest part often is thinking about where to start. But if we look at the algebra, I said we need to know this difference of squares, right? So I have something plus something else. So if I multiply by that something minus that something else, and what I do to the numerator I have to do to the denominator, we know that that's just going to give us a squared, this is our a, the 1, minus b squared. And so remember, multiplying fractions, we just multiply straight across. And I'm not going to distribute yet. And very often you're not going to want to distribute right away. You just want to see what becomes more obvious as you keep going. And you can always distribute later if you need to. So we have 1 minus cosine squared. So remember, you need to know this Pythagorean identity. So if we multiply cosine squared from both sides, we're left with sine squared. So if we plug that in for our 1 minus cosine squared, and then just rewrite the denominator below. And now let's look at where we want to go, right? We want tangent squared. Well, we know tangent squared is sine squared divided by cosine squared. So I have a sine squared here. I have a cosine. If I had one more cosine, I'd have tangent squared, right? So let's factor out a cosine from this term, this quantity here. And how are we going to do that? Well, we're just going to do what we did over here. We're going to take the first term, just like I did here, divide out what we're factoring out, and then do it to the second term. Make sure I stay on the glass. There we go. And then we need to multiply by what we're factoring out, right? And go ahead and, if you're not sure, go ahead and distribute this and make sure it's equivalent to this quantity here. And now let's just do one more simplification. So cosine times cosine, that's cosine squared theta. 1 over cosine theta, I said that's secant theta, which you all remember. Something divided by itself, that's just 1. And now sine squared divided by cosine squared, that's just tangent squared. And so we're done. We've started with the left-hand side, and using algebra and our identities, we've shown that the left-hand side is exactly the same as the right-hand side. Just using, like I said, the algebra and the identities that you already know. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.